to Women Ed. We're just waiting. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us, and then we're going to get going. I hope you've had a lovely Monday at work, or if you are working flexibly, you've had a lovely day relaxing and not working, because flexible working doesn't mean you work on your days off. That's the plan anyway. I'm Kezia. I'm one of the global strategic leaders. I'm going to be introducing this evening's session, and then unfortunately I'm going to have to leave. I have a parental responsibility, which means that I'm just going to basically say hello to everybody and then run away. But I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of my wonderful global strategic leader colleagues. We're going to have to find a better way of calling her something much more snappy. Vivian is here and she's basically bossing the evening. So Vivian's here for that. Natasha is here all the way from the Middle East. So thank you for that. And Lisa's here all the way from Canada. So we've gone truly global today. And in a moment, I'm just going to ask our male manalists. It's the only time you're going to get a manalist in Women Ed to introduce themselves very, very briefly before we get cracking with the evening. This session this evening is about what can male allies do to support their women colleagues. And I think for International Women's Day, breaking the bias, it is churlish and innocent beyond the pale to think that we can move forward with equality and breaking through those layers of bias unless we work with our male counterparts in true partnership rather than just having a very much just a women only area. There are times where Women Ed is a women only area, but certainly when we're trying to break down some barriers, we have to work in partnership with our male colleagues. It is only right that we do that. So in a moment, I'm going to ask each of our male members to just introduce themselves. And the caveat to that is, we're going to start with James, is that he had some severe dental work earlier. So he'll be doing it mostly by mime or dance. So James, if you would like to go first.
Thank you so much, because I hope it's all holding. It's just wearing off now. You remember, I'm sure we've all been to the dentist. You've got that strange wearing off. So thank you so much. I'm James Shea. I'm the portfolio lead of postgraduate teacher education here at the University of Bedfordshire, and my students are the next generation of leaders. So I see it as super, super important that I try to be doing things that enables the leadership of 15 or 20 years time to be as diverse as possible. And currently, I'm just doing things that I come up with or something I learned from working with Women's Ed and so forth. And what I want to do is to learn new ideas about how I can help cultivate that culture of 10% braver amongst those student teachers who are going to be the next future leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Andrew, welcome to you.
Thank you, Kezia, and thank you very much for making me so welcome today. So my name is Andrew Cowley. I was in primary teaching till last year as a deputy head teacher, but I'm now involved in coaching for the Mental Health Award and the Senior Designated Mental Health Leads on behalf of the Carnegie Centre of Education at Leeds Beckett University. I also speak and write about wellbeing, and I've been speaking in the last week to head teachers. I've also been speaking to initial teacher trainees, so about the importance of looking after ourselves and looking after our colleagues across the whole sector and the whole experience of education. And I've been a he for she ally with Women Ed since the very early days. I was invited to an event about 5 years ago, and I've remained an ally through that through this time. And I'm delighted to be here to celebrate and share my experience with everyone today.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Andrew. And Philip.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me along tonight. My name is Philip Wharton. I'm the head teacher of the independent Bonn International School here in Bonn in Germany. I've got horrendous imposter syndrome right now. It's a real honor to be here on this panel tonight. We were asked why we were here. I was very kindly invited along because I got involved in a discussion about the pay gap between women and men. which I've been reading about and learning about. And I was simply appalled by that notion that there is a pay gap. I couldn't believe it because there isn't one in my school. And so I just wanted to learn more about what Women Ed is about. And yeah, just simply glad to be here tonight to share in the discussion.
That's fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Moomin.
Yeah, hi, I'm Moomin Humayun, head of school at the Stockwood Park Academy. It's in Luton Secondary School, part of the Shared Learning Trust. I'm involved and really thankful for being invited today, but I went to hear Vivian at a Research Ed event last year, and I think I was one of maybe 3 or 4 male colleagues in the room. And while she was talking, I felt that I was doing my bit, and leaving that session, I was like, I was clearly not doing anywhere near as much as I need to. And you know, Vivian, just the sheer challenge. And I came back, my first SLT meeting, I was like, we need to do so much more. So really inspired by that talk, and felt actually one of the things I aim for is to balance out the playing field. However, I'm not doing anywhere near as much as I need to. So a real challenge for me to try and support the students here, but also bring about that level playing field amongst staff here as well. And thanks for that, Moomin, because Palm was there as well. So between the two of us, you really got the full breadth of Women Ed's views there.
That's fantastic. Thank you ever so much. Chris.
Oh, well, Chris. Oh, 2 Chris's.
After you, Chris.
After you, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Dyson. So, yeah, I'm Chris. I'm a youth leadership coach based in primarily the Northwest, and I stumbled across Women Ed probably 4 years ago, actually, on Twitter, and was kindly invited to come across and do some coaching there. And since then, I've supported and coached on the maternity and paternity CPD program, so helping males and females transition back into work through the maternity and paternity. And I'm here to learn, I'm here to listen, and my involvement with Women Ed as an ally has helped me as a husband, as a dad, as a coach, and as a leader. And it's always great coming to these events just to listen and learn, really. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you very much, Chris. And lovely you could join us for a short while, Kezia.
Thank you. I do have to sneak out now. I do have a child to get to the doctor. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Kezia. Thank you for that, Chris. Patrick, hello.
Good afternoon, everybody. You'll see my little icon here. I'm actually travelling at the moment, so I've got the camera on. My name is Patrick O'Connor. I've been involved with Women Ed now from the 2nd National Unconference, and again, first connected through Twitter and wanted to go and see what it was more about. It was actually the last face-to-face national unconference where there was a call for pledges, and my pledge was to engage more he for she's to try and get more involved in the Women Ed movement, which I've been doing, and it's great to see so many people here signed up and part of the group today that I'm connected with already and who are really quite active out there in the community.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you. And Ben.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ben Hobbis. I'm an early career primary school teacher based in North Birmingham. Prior to this, I was actually a retail and HR manager for a number of years before transitioning to teacher, and a former student of Kezia's as well, as we all found out in the room beforehand. I think I first came across Women Ed when I started my teacher training journey, and I think quite naively, not in a negative way, but I'd been in many schools where flexible working was the norm, where you know, sort of gender equality was discussion in the curriculum, and then naively thinking there wouldn't be a gender pay gap in education, which there is. And I think through engaging with Women Ed, it's really steered the way I wanted the start of my career to go, finding a school that, you know, amongst other things, does honour that, finding a trust that does that, and also within the curriculum as well. So yeah, really interested to be part of the panel. Thank you for having me, and looking forward to this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. And for some of our colleagues who arrived a little bit late, I'm Vivian Porritt, one of the global strategic leaders of Women Ed. And we also have with us Natasha, who is from...
Would help if I could work the unmute button there. So I'm obviously originally from the UK, but currently based in the Middle East. I'm actually in Qatar.
Thank you very much. And our other global strategic leader is Lisa. Lisa, where are you from?
Hello, I am Lisa, and I am in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Is it cold?
Well, for you, yes, it's about -6, and we're expecting yet more snow. So,
but not doing too bad for you then.
All right, yeah, it's all right. Short weather.
Well, it's fabulous you're all here, and really appreciate that the audience joining us as well, because this is an innovative event for Women Ed, as we were saying earlier. We normally occasionally let the odd man in, not that the man is odd, but an odd number man. And we really wanted to support our he for she's to spread the word of their own learning and what they have been exploring and achieving. And so we're going to organise this evening around some of the questions that the Women Ed community put out for us and said that they would really like our panellists this evening to talk about these issues and to share with our audience what they've learned about them. So we're going to go through our 5 questions. And the first one is supporting flexible working. And Natasha, you're going to lead us in.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first conversation we are having is obviously flexible working. We all appreciate the importance of flexible working for women, the obvious impact that this has on their work-life balance, mental health, etc. But also, I suppose, the challenge that we have in asking for flexible working, and I suppose the worry that we have about it having a negative impact on our careers, our development, etc. And obviously, our panelists have, are in positions in schools where they can, help with that and help with these kinds of conversations, because some of you have the seats where these conversations need to start happening, and can support with, I suppose, other people in these positions in schools who can also help to support flexible working for women in work as well. So away we go. We have a couple of names down, but I would really love for other people to join in, and then also I would love for anybody else in the chats to ask any questions, because this is our opportunity to start asking questions, to start challenging thought, etc. So can I please have, if I could possibly get my list up, which is now magically gone missing. Vivian, can you help me with names?
Yes, it's Chris.
Off my screen.
Chris Dyson and Andrew and Ben are going to kick us off.
Perfect. There you go.
Off you go, Chris.
Well, one of the first questions we've just already had pop up here is, when you say flexible working, what does this look like? Days, times, hours. So tell me, what does it look like in your establishments or through conversations that you've already had?
I mean, I think flexible working is absolutely essential. If a member of staff wants to come back part-time, you've got to be able to make that happen. I remember before I had my first child, and my first one's 18 on Thursday, and that time's just whizzed by. But, I always used to think when I was a classroom teacher, having a full-time 5-day-a-week teacher is better than having 2 part-time teachers, but you listen and you learn. And having 2 brilliant teachers, splitting that time so they can be at home with the child and things is absolutely essential. But one of the real honours it was to be sort of asked to speak on here today is because it's something that happened at my school last summer. Now, I got brought up without a dad at home. I got brought up in a female household. The best teachers and the best colleagues I've ever worked with have all been female. And it broke my heart in a sense with the old Burgundy Book. And for the people who are at home who don't know what the Burgundy Book is the laws of employment that all local authority and trusts are supposed to follow. And it broke my heart last year when my brilliant, outstanding, fantastic, can't speak highly enough of her, Laura Darley, my deputy head teacher, was pregnant. And she gave birth on July the 22nd, which meant, according to the Burgundy Book, that all the 6 weeks summer holiday, which she'd worked all year for, she wasn't entitled to anymore. And I went through HR and said, well, can we start a maternity leave on September the 1st? So she gets the 6 weeks of holiday as deserved, and then starts her 12 weeks at full pay before dropping to half pay for 6 weeks. And they said, no, you've got to stick to that burgundy book. And I thought that is just so unfair. When somebody's worked all year, they're entitled to the holiday pay. So I got in touch with the NEU and I said, there's got to be some way around this. And they said, there's not really. So I had to work with my governors to be creative. And the way in which I sort of worked it out is because she'd missed out on 6 weeks holiday or 30 school days pay. Then I thought us and the governors and my school owed her 30 days pay. So we took an innovative approach where she returned back to school last term on full pay, but she only does 2 days a week in school. And the other 3 days, she's flexibly working at home, answering some emails, sorting out some policies that we need doing. But the sort of thought behind that was that it was essential that she got what was her right. So basically, she comes back full-time next term, but she's basically been back on a full-time salary, well-deserved, but only doing 2 days a week in school. So for 10 weeks, that makes up the 30 days. And I'm really pleased to see that the NEU, and I'm sure other unions are as well, are taking a real stance on this now, because the burgundy book is wrong. If you've worked all year from September for the full school year till school closes, whether it's July the 22nd, July the 27th, you are entitled to that holiday pay during the holiday. So I'm really pleased to see that this has now started to gain momentum and change. And I'm hoping, and I think I'm correct in thinking it's actually on the agenda for the next NEU conference and things. So
yeah, Chris, that's really interesting because I've had summer-born children. So 17th of July was my daughter and the 3rd of August was my son. And it was always like, oh, such bad timing, because it always had an impact on my maternity. So I was going back quite soon after they were born as well. And it was, yeah, it's interesting that these conversations are now happening, and it's really nice to see that people are, you know, taking it seriously. Thank you for that. Moomin.
Yeah, no, I think before I started in my current role, often the idea of flexible working was seen as a deficit model. You know, we need staff here full time, but through the conversation, actually, I want the best staff here for the time. So if it's 1 day, 2 days, I'd much rather somebody be here and give that than try to fit a timetable where I need everyone here full time. And I think some of the challenges that I've had with me, particularly during lockdown, because there's things that maybe I didn't fully appreciate. My son turns kind of 18 at the end of this year, start of next year. So I sometimes forget, and some of the challenges that staff have said to me, well, actually, you do realise that, you know, it's women who are doing the bulk of the childcare. So during lockdown, initially, I had a timetable that was built around for all staff to deliver live lessons, but it wasn't practical. And, you know, it's having an organisation that was open and honest enough where colleagues say, actually, this isn't working for us because of these reasons. So changes need to be made, and being kind of completely accepting of those honest challenges and making those adjustments. And I think looking back at how I may have been as a senior leader before, probably just very fixed kind of mindset, whereas now I think through what I've read, through the challenges of working with a diverse community and a diverse staffing body, it's like, hold on a minute, we need to do more if we're wanting to retain our best staff, we're wanting the best outcomes for people. And also ultimately it's the moral imperative that we need to make these changes because it's what's right for our staff and for our students. So I think, and that you know, I'll be honest, it took me a period of adjustment, you know, because I thought, I need everyone here, I need the kids to have, I had a fixed model and a fixed view of how things should work. And that's been challenged. I've challenged myself, thanks to the likes of Vivian Palm, to say, bloody hell, I'm clearly not thinking in the way I need to be thinking. So that's my kind of throw out to anyone listening. Actually challenge those assumptions that you make about how things have to work, because no, they don't have to work like that, because they're clearly not working like that.
What I took from what you've just said there as well is you've got a working environment where people feel okay and open enough to have that challenge, and that's really important as well to establish that.
I do have a colleague sitting next to me, Artie, who's one of my assistant heads, and I can say, you know, whenever things aren't working, and it's not just about she talks a lot about promoting equity within the staffing body at all times, at all levels, and needing that diversity, cognitive diversity within your team, where I'm not afraid of someone kind of challenging me like that, but also inviting that challenge.
Yeah, it's really important. Hi, colleague who's sitting next to you that we can't see.
Yeah, I think it's really important that movement creates that environment where you are able to have those conversations, and it is those difficult conversations, and you might not have the answer right now, but actually just having a different perspective of somebody else asking those questions, and he's in a position to enable those changes. So it's saying, you know, you expect colleagues to work from 9 to 3, but they've got young children. What can they do? Can we have a different approach for those? And I think equity is really important. So knowing your staff, because it's not a one size fits all model. It's about putting the right support in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree.
And
Patrick.
Just before Patrick comes in, we've got a colleague in the chat reminding us, of course, that flexible working is for men and women. And we just need to usualize it in that way and it not be something that people think is only for women. It needs to be for all colleagues. Sorry, Patrick.
Yeah. Vivian's just said what I was going to say. That's a woman for you, always stealing a man's thunder.
Just picked up the chat.
No, the point I was going to make is everything that's been said so far, absolutely, and it's the learning that we're doing. And that's been a big point for me within the Women Ed movement, is the learning I've made into, well, we'll talk about gender pay gap later on, but around flexible working. And the point I was going to make, just to build on what was said before, is that as leaders, and again, all men on here, we should model the behaviours we want to see. And we should encourage that. I remember when my youngest, who's just about to turn 18, older children available, we all seem to have around 18 here, but when he was born, two female colleagues said to me in the staff room around the paternity leave I was wanting to take, and I was the head at the time, and they were critical of me as a man taking that time out of school. And I had to take them into my office to have the conversation, saying, I'll take that and I'll have that conversation with you, but I do not want that said to any young man in our school, anybody else who's thinking of that. We need people to be able to take their parental responsibilities seriously. We want our children to have those positive role models. You listen to Chris Reddy when he speaks and he talks about, and you'll see his Twitter feed for those that know how he models his fatherhood and his approach to paternity and maternity. We need to be able to share those models with people and become supermodels of that behaviour, in fact, and not just for the children, but also colleagues who may have elderly parents or whatever, for that flexibility that's needed for whoever we are in the culture of care that we've created. And equity is a really important point, because again, for each of the schools I've gone into as a head, and I've asked the question around, say, for example, leave of absence, and I've said, is it equitable? And I've always been told yes, but when I've looked into it, many of the support staff who can't cover for each other in free periods because they don't have them, can't take the time anyway. So they're double hit with lower pay and not the flexibility that other colleagues have. So it's going to be a constant challenge. And even I'd encourage anybody in your own school, if you think that you are quite flexible, you think you are equitable in what you do, then look deeper and speak to staff. Staff voice is really important on this one, because staff will, again, when you create that culture of care, tell you what they do believe. And I think it's how we respond to that, and are genuinely flexible, not just the flexibility that the Burgundy book offers or doesn't offer, as Chris said.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
I'm going to get bossy because we're behind our timetable already, and we've got people who haven't yet contributed in this conversation, which I think is Andrew and Ben.
The point I was going to pick up on about the utilising it is sort of that language that we use in, and this isn't just in schools, but in society in general. Like, and I find myself having to stop myself when you say, like, oh yeah, she only works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No, she works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah. She only works 3 days a week. I find that my mentor, who's my deputy head, she works 3 days a week. And I had to stop when someone said, oh, I haven't seen her today. And I had to stop myself, like, she works Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's why she's here today. And I think that's just, even though it's a little one, or comments about, I worked part-time last year alongside my degree. And I think people don't realise how hard working part-time in a school is, like sometimes you don't feel like you're part of that community on the 2 or 3 days you're not there, and you shouldn't have to become part of that community by picking up your emails on your day off, messaging colleagues and finding that. And I think that's something that, like I said, it's a societal thing, but in schools as well, making sure we don't say, part-timer coming in, or that they only work that time. And I think that's just it sounds like a really little thing, that choice of language, but it does have a big impact.
Yeah, someone's just said a comment here which said, is part-time in a school truly part-time? And I know I've got part-time staff, which is really unusual in the Middle East, because we don't generally, just because of visas and things, it's really difficult to get flexible working in the Middle East. But what I would say is I do have somebody that's part-time, and she is not part-time. She is always, and I've had to say to her a number of times, stop, just stop, you need to, but people, I think because of things like that, Ben, where we're using language, it makes people then think, oh, well, I should be doing more. And that's not okay. We need to be, I suppose, kind of like forcing that you are working these days a week, and that is all you should be working. I don't want to see an email from you, actually. I'm happy to see your email on the day that you're working, but that is it. And then Chris.
And Andrew, I think it was.
Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Yeah. To me, it's something that should be in place. In my years' experience, my first few years of teaching, it was something that was never on the agenda with the school I worked in, and the opinion was always very much no, it won't work. But then it had to start working, because the head faced a position where very many members of staff were having their children. And the option was for him, if you don't start looking after your staff in that particular way, you're going to lose them. And the danger is you're going to lose good staff who are actually providing good education for the children. And as Ben rightly said, that language about, oh, they only work these days, they work collaboratively, work together. And I've seen very, very many successful collaborations between teachers working collaboratively. And it's quite right to say that their part-time isn't truly part-time, because they are looking at things at home, and they are doing things at home, because that's because they're professional. But I think an important thing is that parents sometimes face extra scrutiny, and there is evidence of bias about in further workplaces beyond teaching that about parenthood, and it is important that we take our parental responsibility seriously. And it's also important, part of flexible working is also flexible attitude, and to enable our teachers and our support staff to be able to really celebrate those important things in their own children's lives, like attending their first day at school, attending their nativities, their sports days. A bit of flexibility and a bit of thought into allowing that to happen shows that they're valued, and it means that they can appreciate those important things in their child's life, and their child can remember that, and that will show that they're truly valued. And that's why I think we need to be ensuring that we do have an attitude where flexibility is celebrated.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree wholeheartedly there. And then I think the last one, Chris, before Vivian will intro the next one.
I mean, great, just to follow on what the lovely Andrew was just saying just then. What I was saying basically is valuing staff, and allowing this flexibility in daytimes when they're actually in work brings rewards tenfold. So I don't care if you're the cleaner, one of the lunchtime staff, whether you're a part-time teacher, whether you're a full-time teacher, whether you work in the office as a learning mentor, as a TA, anybody who's got a child's concert at Christmas will get time to go and see that concert, even if it means myself or one of my SLT going and covering. Anybody who wants to go and see their child in a sporting event, because as a deputy in my school, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I remember my daughter, when she was in reception, playing Oopsie Daisy Angel in the reception production. And the thing about reception productions is they tend to be at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then at 1:30. They don't get them coming back at 5:30 and 7 o'clock at night and things. And I had to miss her performance, and it really broke my heart. So when I became a head, I thought the first thing I'm going to do is anybody who's got these things, they don't have to fill out the pink form, leave of absence. They just say, oh, my daughter's got this concert, my son's got this sporting fixture. Is it okay if I go? And they know anybody can go, no matter what level you're working at school. And the reward you get back from those members of staff is absolutely amazing.
Fabulous, fabulous. And there are lots and lots of schools who are working those kinds of approaches, and we need to be celebrating where it is working so that it does start to get usualized and other people realize what is possible. So we need to all be more 10% braver and share where it's working and share the examples. Lovely, thank you very much. So that was our first question, supporting flexible working, which our Women Ed community wanted men in the audience and women listening also to be able to have some more ideas and thoughts. And I know people will be very happy to, be able to get in touch with any of you and ask for your learning in that way. So the second question, we've already been touching on it so far, is addressing the gender pay gap. Most of you will know this is my University Challenge Specialist Women Ed subject. And I just wanted to put it in context that in most countries, we're lucky if the average gender pay gap equates to 20 pence in every pound. So that means, because there are some countries where it's much less. So roughly in England, it's women earn 20p for every pound less than a man does. So that's a fifth, isn't it? I think my maths is correct in that. So if you thought of your own salaries and took a fifth of that each year, that's on average the difference for women. And if you multiplied that by a 40-year career, then we're talking of a significant gender pay pension gap as well. And all of the data and all of the research points to that. So, big question then, what is it that you are all doing and that others can do to be able to reduce the gender pay gap between men and women? And the main area where it is worse is women leaders, women in senior leadership roles. So what are you all doing? What are your thoughts there? Muman, you wanted to kick off on this?
Yeah, so just obviously just starting the blurb for me is, firstly, speaking to the leadership team about the importance that equal pay is a legal requirement under the Equality Act, because again, these are words, but colleagues need to understand that why we do the things we do, but also the moral driver, the moral imperative. Paying women less contributes to the gender pay gap. And also, I think, Vivian, you made the point about pensions contributions, which, I'll be honest, I didn't think, I've never thought about pensions contributions, but when you then talked about it and I went back and researched, and I really challenged my leadership team about some of these things. And they said, well, why are we talking about this? I'm saying we're talking about it because it's important. And from a personal, Chris mentioned his own upbringing. I was raised single mum, raising 4 kids, doing 3 jobs, knowing what she wasn't paid. So these things bug me. It bugs me an awful lot. Good. So the question then is, well, what are you doing about it? And one of the things that I've taken away, which I didn't know about, was when you talked about salary and when colleagues apply for jobs and people put their salary down, and I've said this to SLT, and I've said it in some training sessions within the trust. Actually, why do we do that? Because women, on average, will be earning less. Therefore, when they put down their salary, they're always going to be paid less for those jobs. Why aren't we paying them what the going rate is for that job, rather than benchmarking it against the lowest salary available, which is what women end up with? And things that we've done, again, is being transparent with pay. So in our kind of adverts, making sure it's benchmarked, that there is equity across. So it's not, we're not just paying, what you're coming into when you apply for the job. also ensuring that in our adverts it's very clear, particularly with supporting and with childcare, also targeting CPD for staff as well, because we know to help colleagues progress in their career. So rather than leaving it up to chance, actually explicitly identifying and saying to staff, actually, these are the things that would benefit you. I don't know, Artie, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I think Movement creates a great culture where, you know, having those conversations is easy, and he encourages the fact that, you know, if you've come and speak to me about it and you don't feel that it's a taboo subject, and he's quite open, you know, he often talks. So one of our senior leadership team meetings, he spoke about this, and actually everyone else in the room was taken aback, but it's really, really important, I think. And so creating that culture, and also for me, encouraging one another to have those conversations, because it is really important, and encouraging and celebrating those wins with one another.
Fabulous, fabulous, thank you. We're very proud in Women Ed. I'm ecstatic that the gender pay gap report that we did with ASCL and NAHT and NGA before Christmas has been referenced 5 times in the DFE guidance to the School Teachers Review Board. And they are now actually saying that there is a gender pay gap, and there has been for 10 years, between senior leaders and men and women. So in theory, that ought to lead to some action, shouldn't it? Who else wants to come in on the gender pay gap? Have you got your hand up for that, Chris? Chris?
Sorry, I was just nibbling my thing. No, I didn't send a hand down from last time.
All right then. Patrick.
Yeah, excuse me. I'd say a challenge to everybody who's in the meeting today, because something I didn't know when I've been like my 18th year as a head teacher now, and I didn't know this when I was younger, and it's only through Women Ed really that I've although I've been aware of it before Women Ed, really explored it much more, is what is the gender pay gap in your school? You don't have to answer that now, you don't have to put it in the chat, but do you know it? Because every school I go into as a leader, it's not known, it's not being discussed. Trusts are supposed to publish that data and know that data, but then it's not shared widely. A trust that I worked in about 3-4 years ago, when I arrived, when we looked, we were 18.5 gender pay gap within that trust. Now, during that 2-year period, we actually were able to move that down to about a 4% gap, which I was really, really pleased and proud of. But it's still a gender pay gap. There was still a 4% gender pay gap there. So I'm celebrating being a bit biased rather than discriminatory, rather than a lot. But I'd actually challenge the people here just to ask that question within their own organisations. If you're not the head teacher or you're not an exec in a MAT, to find out what yours is. If you're a state maintained school, it's not published in the same way, but the local authority should know where that is as well. And I think when we talk about talent development later on, I think for me that's just touching on that is that. For me, I used to think as a younger leader that hard work and talent equaled success. Is hard work, talent plus opportunity, and it is the opportunity that's quite often missing. So it's making sure those opportunities are there through our talent development process, but also it's been touched on already there by moving around the recruitment and look at our recruitment processes. But the talent development is very much around our retention and promoting within it, and actually not just about equality again, but the real move around equity to try and match some of that gap.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd love schools to publish their low gender pay gap and say, this is why you should come and work here. You know, I think we've got to be a bit more proactive and innovative in these ways. Chris, you were coming in on that.
I think it's important to kind of realise as well that not a lot of people understand that there is a gender pay gap. And if it wasn't for Women Ed, I would have no idea. And I think it's okay not to know. I think it's okay, and sometimes you know, you don't know what you don't know sometimes, but if you do know, it's not okay to do nothing about it. I think that's kind of the difference. And I operate primarily working with young people, and in part I now feel like I have a responsibility to raise awareness to these challenges with the young people that I work with. So that's part of my work, and I see I see it mostly in the coaching that I do with the maternity paternity program, because we have people who are returning to work and exploring the negotiation process or thinking about negotiation, and even using the word negotiation is difficult because that puts people on the back foot almost. And I remember when I was applying for my extended paternity leave, and I was the first person in my place of work to go through that process, and I was really worried. And I was really worried because I wouldn't get it. And I was really worried if I didn't get it, what would that mean? Would that mean that I'm not valued at that place? Would that mean that I would have to then explore other opportunities? But I got it, and that then gave other people the confidence to then go for it. And a lot of people that I'm working with on the maternity paternity project really worry about that initial conversation with their head teacher. And it's a worry really that we need to understand that people have, and we need to think about how we make people feel in those conversations, because Chris touched on it earlier in that we need to make our staff feel valued and respected, and the way we react to the question of flexible working is really important, because it's really affecting the way people think about returning back to schools. And what we don't want to be doing, we don't want to be losing some of these amazing teachers because they're not given the opportunity to balance work alongside the more important thing, which is the family.
And of course, the reduced salaries within people coming back from parental leave also influences greatly the gender pay gap. Thanks, Chris. James?
Thanks very much. Let me put my hand down. So I've been working with Women Ed for a few years now, and this had an impact directly on this issue in my course, because what traditionally would be happening was the student would go to their interview and they would be appointed on M1, and that's where they would start. But actually, a lot of them came with extra qualifications, extra experience, and were much stronger. And so part of what we're trying to do is to say, as you were saying earlier about negotiation, we've got to cultivate that kind of 10% bravery. We've got to cultivate the, knowing how to negotiate. And so we now run workshops on that very thing about negotiation, and we embed it into the lectures and into the course. It's all about the fact that they are going to do it. And then more than that, we've got students who've been successful. And I won't say every student who asks for M2 or M5 as part of their negotiation is successful, but some are. And then that comes through the WhatsApp, because that's how they all communicate. That comes through the WhatsApp. Oh my gosh, somebody negotiated a higher start because they had this extra experience. And that's cultivating self-efficacy amongst these students. Now, you might not think it's a big deal, an extra 2,000, but that's an extra 2,000 year on year, because that student's now 2,000 ahead. And every year that they didn't get that pay rise because they weren't brave enough or somebody else was, that creates more of the pay gap. So it's been super important for us to realize we've got to cultivate the culture of negotiation from the very beginning, and that's going to really help them in that kind of long-term way.
Oh, absolutely. And women are nervous of negotiation. Men are as well. We've been talking about that. But it's actually just a game, really, because everybody got to know the rules, and then everybody's got to play it. So we do have a negotiation video on the Women Ed YouTube that gives you the rules, and it helps you to play that game in that way. So that's brilliant, James. You got your hand up, Natasha?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that really, because Amanda in the chats here and Kurt also mentioned something, and they were saying, how do we start this? And actually, from what everyone's saying there, it's about somebody has stepped forward and been brave. And actually, I think that many of us are leaders, and actually, do we need to just start opening these conversations up? Because one of the things that Amanda said was, you know, it's actually terrifying having to approach a manager, a leader, or whatever it is in a school. And actually, people may not think that that person is as approachable, etc. And I think we have an obligation to our staff to start saying, right, guys, you can, you know, when you're doing an induction or whatever it might be, you know, you can have a conversation about pay. You can ask for more money. Whether you're getting it or not is another thing. It might be that whole, well, actually, you know, you need to do this or whatever it might be, and part of that negotiation process. But I think that we have an obligation to tell people that it is an option to have these conversations. And I think what happens is everyone waits for that brave person to step forward before anyone else is then willing to have those conversations. But for me in my school, I'm always like, look, we need to be open and having these conversations, but I need to offer that as an option to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Last comment on this then, Moomin.
Yeah, just what nail on the head what Natasha said about having that conversation. And I remember when I first arrived here, I had a meeting with a colleague who just apologized for having this conversation with me, and it was about pay, and she said, and I said, look, why are you sorry for it? She goes, oh, because I was told last time I brought it up, I was told to not mention it and it wasn't appropriate or professional. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, and then I looked at it, I thought, actually, what's happening is wrong, like morally, ethically, and again, I've got the Equalities Act on my voice, like what's happening is wrong and I need to fix it now. And I said to her, don't be afraid to challenge or talk. But again, it shouldn't be, you know, it's horrible the fact that people are kind of knocking, so please may I have this no, don't politely ask. You have an entitlement. Right. And I think what Natasha's saying, actually shifting that culture where organizations aren't affronted because actually someone's fighting for their right to equal pay, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's good for everyone to understand that because of the social stereotyping, a lot of women want to please other people, and then very nervous about doing something that they think might mean the leaders in the organization won't like them anymore or won't favor them in any way. And we have to understand that's the culture that we can support. We need to support women within. I think that's really, really important. And on our womened.org website, we've got a page on the gender pay gap under campaigns, and we've got case studies there of women negotiating and testing things out and how good it makes them feel when they actually get what they deserve. So all of this is to play for, isn't it? We can work on all of this. Thanks ever so much for that then. And we're going to move on, and Lisa's going to pick us up now.
Thanks for the discussion. I offered to help last minute, told my male boss that I was going to take some time this morning. Didn't give him an opportunity to say no or negotiate any flexible working. And I'm getting better at that. And I want to thank the men here for coming along and prodding the conversation. The next topic to toss around is about supporting women's professional development, particularly mentorship and coaching. Lots of research out there that women need different types of networking and different mentoring. But could we talk about your experiences with your women colleagues and mentoring that you've provided, sought for them, pointed in the right direction? This is a tough one. You know, we're all adults. We all need to sort of pull on our big girl drawers and get it done ourselves, but we do need our male allies for sure. So what are your experiences with that?
Wondered if Philip wanted to kick off. He's not had a chance to get in yet.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's just been really fascinating to listen to this. I mean, I'm coming from towards this conversation from quite a different point of view, insofar as I've never actually worked in the UK. After graduating, doing my PGCE, I then left the UK and have worked in international schools since. So I'm really, it's very interesting hearing this this conversation, and really, if I say this with the greatest of respect, it's quite sad in some ways to hear that these conversation, people not feeling brave and feeling not feeling confident enough to approach their leadership. I think this is a great shame, and it's really inspiring that clearly so many male colleagues are here and female colleagues here who are approachable and do allow those conversations in their setting. So that's wonderful. But I suppose my own experiences of helping my female colleagues with their professional development comes from specifically in my school, creating a female SLT. We didn't have an SLT when I first started in my school, and it wasn't my intention to create a female SLT at all, but it happened that way. They were the best people for the role. We did it in a very fair way, overhauled our recruitment policy and our interview policy, and made sure that it was done much more transparently and in a way that really promoted people's strengths. And we ended up with a great female SLT, and I really think that gives those colleagues that opportunity to have a really productive dialogue with each other that doesn't necessarily involve me. And so many fruitful conversations have come from that team, and then are brought to me, and we could really collaborate together. And my other personal experience in answer to this question is to do touches with on the first area we were talking about, supporting flexible working, which is to do with sabbaticals, which we haven't mentioned yet. We really promote that in our school, and we have a lot of our team who have gone off on sabbaticals, including one of our SLT who's currently on sabbatical for 6 months. And I think this really supports colleagues with families, and also obviously supports the health and well-being of colleagues who perhaps are struggling with workload or family life or whatever it is. And I think we have to be really brave and acknowledge the fact that we do need to be, as managers in schools, perhaps going that extra mile to create those opportunities for colleagues and for ourselves to take that break from work if we need it, and just to create a space that's safe in a school to have that dialogue and it to be okay to ask for that. That's my contribution.
Thanks for that. There's some interesting comments in the chat, questioning the terms coaching and mentoring for sure. The article that Vivian sent along to sort of support this topic talks specifically about when male teachers get mentored. It's very tracked, it's very deliberate. This is what you need to do for this position. This is what you need to do for the next position. Whereas women get mentoring that talks more about the qualities that they need to develop, the characteristics that good leaders have. So I think for women, we need perhaps more urgent, more deliberate, more meaningful coaching and mentoring, if those are the words we even want to use. But there's some really great comments in the chat. Patrick, do you have your hand up? We've got a few hands up.
Yeah, I've got mine up. That feeds really nicely into my point. Part of, as a he for she, one of the main things I do is provide not just the coach and mentoring, but actual sponsorship is probably the term I would use for female colleagues and people that approach for a formal coaching conversation or mentoring, but you actually see it through to the conclusion. Look at the individual barriers with them and help them into that post to help support and advocate and lift and help them. It's not about doing it at all, but sort of encourage and engage and empower the women to actually really engage with the same sort of process that you've described there that a man more typically would have. And I think if we can offer that as a service, as an opportunity for the women within our schools, within education, I think we'll make real strides forwards, rather than just, as you said, just coaching as a grow sort of model or an instructional model, but one much more around sponsorship to support them into roles.
And one of the, Kurt in the chat is wondering whether advocacy is maybe a better word for us than sponsorship in that way. Sorry, Lisa, sorry I interrupted.
No, you did not interrupt any time. We've got a couple of other hands. Moomin?
Hi there, Artie. I'll let Artie.
Yeah, I think that if we don't intentionally or make that conscious effort to formally mentor women, that informal mentoring of males by males just naturally happens. So I think we have to have that deliberate approach to then, you know, nurture that talent, spot that talent. And I think it's our job as, you know, senior leaders to really showcase the staff around us and give them those platforms. And to be able to shine and recognize and celebrate with them. And I think create an environment where, you know, it's okay to make a mistake because you're going to catch them, you know, and it's about allowing them to really grow and nurturing that talent, really.
Excellent. You know, in Alberta, we have LQS, Leadership Quality Standards, that we are held to account to follow and develop. And one of them is specifically building leadership in others. And I know women I've approached are so surprised. What do you mean I could be a leader? Well, first of all, you're a leader already. You don't need an office and you don't need a plaque on the door. Could just be a champion of some sort, but I think that's it specifically. And I don't know if there's a gender attached to that, but I think if those of us reaching a certain age, 50 and above, want good, solid people to take our spots, we need to look for them, give them challenges and invite them along for PD, for advocacy, for sponsorship, for sure. James, you've got your hand up.
Thanks very much. I think this is one of those areas where we start to think about, as a man, what I can be doing here, because I'll be honest with you, when I first learned about this idea of mentoring, I think I had quite a kind of stereotypical view of professional development was all about developing your leadership qualities and so forth. And then what happened when I found out about the whole idea that you can recommend mentoring as kind of like a way of development is I went and talked to, you know, senior female leaders in my institution. And what they said was really quite striking. You know, they talked about how they dressed, how they shook hands, how they operated in meetings and all the kind of things that they've had to do. So it wasn't just about, are you a good leader? As you quite rightly say, you are a good leader. It's how do you access leadership roles, which is a completely different thing altogether. And how you cope with looking at an entire white male executive leadership and thinking, I want to be somebody in there, and kind of coping with those kind of things. And what they were saying was, you know, the mentoring doesn't just offer how to be a good leader, but how to deal with some of the kind of internal conflict that comes with being that type of person who's breaking down barriers and so forth. I found it quite enlightening, really, you know, to learn about that. And now when I talk to, you know, future leaders, I do think actually there's a wider remit here that we've got to be thinking about, to recognize the kind of inbuilt systems that are already there that still have to be overcome. It's not been resolved. There still are hugely male leaderships in institutions, and you're still, all of you, I'm in my 50s too, all of you still fighting those kind of battles, as I'm sure you've seen recently. So I think it's quite a good thing from the male perspective is to kind of think about what is this advice that I am giving and making sure it's really quite informed, as well as I'm sure Vivian will no doubt remind us all.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. I just want to segue then into the next session by saying that the conversation about being deliberate with the support for women in education and those who want to move through into leadership is exactly why Women Ed partnered with the National College of Education, on a senior leaders master and apprenticeship, and also why we are particularly wanting to support women from underrepresented groups, especially women with an ethnic heritage, because we have learned that schools, when some of the women have wanted to apply for that program, for example, the responses they've had from senior leaders were often, "We don't think you're ready yet." And those responses came especially to women of colour compared to white women. And these are, all of the research is very clear that these things happen, but when it's actually happening to you as a woman or somebody trying to support that person, it's really hard and it's really tough, because you can hear that bias in their voice straight away. And that's what we're trying to do, aren't we? To break the bias with International Women's Day. So I think this is a big issue. And for all the women listening, we want to support you in middle leadership and senior leadership. And we've got a great women-led program within those apprenticeships to help with that. And I have to boast about it, because in the first cohort of 59 women, 68% of them have got new responsibilities or promotion. And I think that's a great statistic when they haven't even finished the 2-year course yet. So we're going there for the rest of that cohort now, if that's what they choose to do. So I would take from that being absolutely deliberate in supporting women. Don't leave it to chance, because we're all good girls. We just sit down and get on with the work, waiting for somebody to spot how brilliant we are. So we need the help, and we need that deliberate support and encouragement. Thank you very much for that, letting me rant about that. And I'm continuing with tackling sexism. And I don't know if you all saw it quite recently, I think about a week or so ago, there were a group of global leaders being introduced together at the European Union. And I can never remember her name, but you know, the fairly blonde stroke grey-haired, thin woman who's the commissioner or something.
Christine Lagarde.
That's it, her. Right? She was already on the platform, and Macron was there, the French Prime Minister, and another leader from Africa joined the platform at her side of it, and he walked straight past her and went over to Macron and the other man that was there to shake their hands. And this was a very senior EU official publicly humiliated by this man walking past her. One of the other EU leaders just kind of like shrugged his shoulders and thought, that's not right. But Macron actually then pointed the other leader in the woman's direction and indicated to him that he needed to go over and shake her hand. So he was tackling that sexism in a diplomatic way. But knowing the sexism around, I was shocked it could be so public with such a senior woman. So that's my provocation to us all. How is it that we are really going to tackle these everyday examples of sexism so that they don't spill over into utter discrimination? Philip.
On a much smaller scale, I experienced a similar type of thing. The other day I was in a meeting with a parent and in support of the child's teacher, who is female, and the parent it was the father of this boy, and the father just would not acknowledge the teacher. Really, the teacher was trying to outline the issue of the child, and the father would just persistently talk to me. And I think my point is, it just goes, for me, it's just being deliberate all the time and steering the conversation back to the teacher. She was the expert, not me. I was there to support her. She'd asked me to come along because we knew how difficult the father was, but he wanted to talk to me and he would only address me. But I just was very deliberate about that, kept putting the conversation back to her, and we got the point across in the end by basically me shutting up and just not responding to anything he said, and just would look at her. But you just have to keep plugging away at it, and I think that's the only way we're going to be able to achieve that, is to be deliberate all the time.
Absolutely, definitely. Ben?
Yeah, mine probably a bit of a different angle, but one of the responsibilities I've just taken on is looking at our assembly and sort of tutor program within a primary school, is exposing our children to some to empower our children to be aware of these things that are happening even at a primary school level. So you'll be glad to know that tomorrow's assembly I've put down is what is International Women's Day, and we will be talking about things like he for she and all that sort of things as well with our children from EYFS, so the earliest through to year 6, and sort of tailored for that. But my head teacher, he challenged me back and said, are you addressing things like misogyny? Are you talking about things like that with the children? Are you talking about those really overt but also the everyday examples? Because actually, he said, even though we're primary school, our children will still affect them, whether it affects them now, from what they see in the media, from what they hear, or from in the future. So making sure that we do it right from an early age, so they know, well, actually that's happening, that's not right, and knowing how to challenge it, like we've said, but challenging it in the right way as well, and giving them those tools to do that from such a young age.
Absolutely, because all the evidence is that children have a fixed view around these aspects by the time they're 6. So we've got a really big job to do. Andrew, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think, Vivian, it's very important, particularly in our role, if we're as school leaders, is to challenge sexism we see when it goes on. There's 2 particular instances that always stand out in my mind that I dealt with. One was there was a young male member of staff, and he was being, let's just say, very inappropriate with many of the female members of staff. And I took him to one side and said, look, there are people who feel uncomfortable about the way you're speaking to female staff. And his response was, well, yeah, come on, let them come and speak to me. And so I just gave him a very stern look and said, I am. And that was enough to deal with it, because it just made it very clear that I wasn't going to have any of his nonsense as a man in school, and he very very swiftly corrected his ways after that. There was the other incident when I was deputy head. I was pulled aside by a member of staff and said, would I speak to another NQT about what she was wearing? It was actually the length of her skirt. And I said, no, I will not do that, because 1, I'm not the fashion police, and 2, I can't see anything inappropriate there. You know, just two incidents just required a management decision, a very quick decision to be made, but it just needed that sexism to be stood up against, to make it very clear that we're not going to accept some things you might see outside of school, but just really establish the culture and ethos that sexism is going to be challenged.
Thank you, Andrew. Absolutely. And it can, if we don't tackle the small examples, then they're going to get bigger and bigger, aren't they? Chris Dyson. Chris.
Thanks, guys. Just some really interesting points there. I mean, but I'm in a strange place at sort of my school where I've got 73 staff, and there's only myself and 2 male TAs, and the rest of the staff are all female and things. But also at home, I've got a 13-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son, as well as my lovely little 4-year-old that's running around now, waving and things. But I think it's essential, especially with social media now, that all schools are doing the peer-on-peer child protection training. Now, I know a lot of schools have got into trouble at primary level where child protection teams have been and said, have you done your peer-on-peer? And they've said, no, it's really a high school issue, upskirting and things such as that. And they've been absolutely cut down in flames straight away, because as you said at the start, it's essential that we're looking at this sexism at a primary level. So when they've got their own mobile phones, when they're on Instagram and Snapchat, they're thinking before they're posting. And we did our peer-on-peer training January the 4th, and it was eye-opening. There's so many things that you sort of miss and you don't recognise as being sexism. So I'd highly recommend all schools are getting on board. Primary, especially as well as high schools, are doing their peer on peer.
Super. We've got to tackle it at the youngest age possible, and of course that's a real parental issue then, even before children get to school. Moomin.
Yeah, no, just picking on what Andrew said about calling it out and not being afraid to call it out. And you know, often it's the subtle ways explicitly, but when staff are to say, hold on a minute, that's not acceptable, rather than, because it is much easier to ignore much of what happens. So, you know, the casual racism, casual homophobia, sexism, it is, you know, collectively, as for all of us, it's easier just to say, well, it's not really that. It's not that serious. It needs to be challenged so that the tone is set. And the other part, just something that we did here, and a reflection for me, when I started, I have a senior leadership team, and I have a core SLT who are my deputies. Now, obviously, we met as a team for some during COVID to make decisions about school improvement. But what I wasn't conscious of, you know, it took, you know, Artie here to say, you do realise it's a group of 4 men who are meeting to discuss, you know, and I was like, you know, I had no idea. So actually, I disbanded it because actually it wasn't it was an echo chamber, but I needed someone to kind of nudge me to say, look, you know, do you see how this comes across? And also, do you not notice that there's not a real diversity of thinking within this table? So I said, actually, you're right. So disbanded that. So I've got the voices of the whole team, because everyone has, because the message I was giving out, you know, subconsciously, actually, these are the voices that matter. These are the voices I trust. All happen to be male voices. And I'm like, it's absolute nonsense. I know, you know, I value everyone, but I needed to explicitly make it happen. But it's important that I have staff around me who, yeah, because I may not notice, I may not be conscious to it, which is why I'm glad I've got the people around me that I did.
Thank you very much for that from all of you. We're going to move on to the final question, and it's very linked with tackling sexism anyway. So it's about hearing women's voices, especially underrepresented groups. And Lisa, I think you're picking this up. Oh no, it's Natasha. Sorry.
It's Palm under Lisa's name.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, Lisa.
It's Lisa Palm Lisa. That's
you're here, Palm. Woo!
Yeah, under Lisa's name.
With, you know, an appropriate top as well, I think, for Women's International Women's Day. It's been really great to be listening into all these conversations. Actually, it's been really, really powerful. And although I've been like sending out messages via Lisa's name, thank you, Lisa. It's just so heartwarming and so wonderful to hear the kinds of discussions and conversations that are taking place here. And if we could distill and bottle everything that's here and send it out to every single school across the country, just think what difference it would make to all schools. It would be so powerful. So I get to do the final ones. So I kind of jumped in. So thanks, Tash. Appreciate that. And what the last topic is perhaps one of the most powerful things that the challenges that women face. We talk about microaggressions, don't we, now? And it reminded me of this book, which is one of my favourite reads, Mary Beard, Women in Power. And there's a cartoon in here, which I'm going to hold up, and I'm hoping you'll see it in the wrong way. And it's basically, there we go, you probably can't see it.
The
Miss Triggs. Miss Triggs,
Oh.
that's the one, Vivian. And it's a picture of a group of people sitting around a table, and there's one woman, and all the men are there. And then this man says, "That's an excellent suggestion, Miss Triggs. Perhaps one of the men here would like to make it." And I think that's probably the challenge that most women face, that their voices aren't heard. They're not able to amplify those voices. So the question, I guess, this final topic is, how do you do that? How do you ensure that the underrepresented voices are heard? And I'm gonna, I guess, James first, because your hand shot up there, ready to speak.
Thanks very much. Let me put my hand down first. I mean, this is something really quite important to me. One of the things we do at the university with the student teachers, we try to give them platforms to cultivate their leadership credentials. So we have conferences where we have debates, and it's important that they have opportunities to run their own conference at the end of the course as well. And it's all about providing opportunities. And what was happening before we got involved with Women's Ed is that we could not get the platforms for some of these voices, female voices, people of colour and so forth, simply because they weren't coming forward. And what we needed to do was create a culture where they felt that they could come forward. And then since we've achieved that, and we do now have really great diverse debates with good representation, and you're suddenly starting to hear really quite a different voice on those platforms. We have debates about a headscarf wearing Muslim female. We'll talk about being the only headscarf wearing Muslim female in her school placement and some of the challenges that she faced on that placement. And it's really kind of important that those kind of things get articulated. We talked about gender in PE, and some of the stories about gender in PE really come through strongly. And then for me, just you organising the conferences, we're seeing that different people are stepping forward, they're organising the conference differently, they're choosing different narratives to platform, and it's creating much more diversity across that. And that wasn't happening before, 4 or 5 years ago, that wasn't happening. And we've had to create a culture where people feel comfortable to step up and do that type of thing. And now I'm really pleased because I'm getting access to those voices through creating that culture of platforming.
And that's really powerful, isn't it? Because what you've done there is you've almost shifted your culture just by simply allowing people to have a voice, which, if you didn't give them that, you'd be carrying on in the same way. It's the same thing that I think someone was saying just a few minutes ago, that Mumin was saying about how if you don't allow those voices to appear, to be heard, you're never really going to change your organisation in any way, shape or form. Mumin, your hand is up.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm just briefly talk. So I guess for me, and I've spoken to SLT, particularly as men, being mindful of our behavior and the spaces we occupy, because it's that kind of we spread out and suddenly there's less space. Just to bring that in, actively pushing colleagues forward. I'm going to just let Artie talk about a project that something that's come about, and also being really explicit. So we're training the team as a whole on the whole listening part, but my male colleagues have actually reflected and said, actually, in discussions, I'm going to limit myself to 2 questions, because I know normally I get 50% of the floor space. And if you recognize that in yourself, you say, do you know what? If there's 10 people in the room and I'm taking 50% of the floor space, it's not equitable. So that's what I need to do. Now, we did a staff survey a while back, and I know lots of schools do staff surveys, and for doing it. But the result from that was lots of staff felt that they weren't kind of listened to. And I'm going to let Artie talk about the race charter. It's something that we're working on, and how that has given a voice, particularly to lots of underrepresented groups within the school, from TA through to SLT.
So we started this race equality charter mark across the trust, but actually we started a working party at school. So it was a general email, would you like to get involved? There was 21 staff of various roles to gender and race, and so everybody got involved. And it's about empowering the staff that we have, allowing them to chair those meetings, allowing them to lead on certain projects. And I think creating an environment where if you do fall, I'm going to catch you, but also it's about then championing those wins, and we're all in it together. And actually it's watching the growth of staff from start to now. It's just been phenomenal, and it's been really nice because for students they've been able to see it, and students can then we had World Hijab Day where students had those conversations. It's creating those environments where, you know, girls were able to come and try a headscarf on, and promoting those conversations within students. And for International Women's Day tomorrow, we've actually got a boys group as well. Like, how do you champion women? It's not always just about women, but, you know, what can you do as young males to champion women? And it for us, it's kind of growing from strength to strength, and watching staff grow and develop and championing those wins is great.
And some of those staff members who are now presenting at executive level, that we've got colleagues, and they present amazingly well. I don't know why I think they wouldn't, but they presented to SLT, then to the executive board. And it's been wonderful to see. And I think, hold on, we have so much talent within the organisation, but if for most of the time that talent is hidden or isn't given the voice, we're losing out as an organisation.
And I think it's as leaders to promote that, right? To make sure that they're seen, they are heard, and to really champion that.
That's about trust as well, though, isn't it? And I think your ability to trust your staff to do that, that's powerful as well, because you're showing that you understand that they have a voice, and it matters. And I bet that has impacted on well-being as well. And the two go hand in hand, don't they, really? Tash, do you want to I'll pass over to you now.
Sure, absolutely, no worries. Chris, hands up. Ready?
Hi, yeah. I think when we're talking about how we hear women's voices, we've first got to learn how to listen, because listening is a really difficult skill, and we've got to kind of listen for what is said, but also for sometimes what is not said, because what is not said is more important sometimes than what's said, and we need to be inviting people in and giving permission for people to contribute as well. And like Mummy just alluded to, that it's very easy for certain people and certain characters to dominate conversations, and I think we need to start getting comfortable with being able to hold people back that sometimes contribute a lot, because in staff meetings around schools, I see that we're all leaders, regardless of title. We've all got leadership capabilities and responsibilities, and we need, if we start to hear these voices, things can really improve. And Malavile Krishmanassis, she did a blog a while ago, and I have to dig it out about how it was really good. It's about like how we listen with our eyes, with our ears, and our mind and our heart. And if we can listen from those kind of four perspectives, we can really start to make a change, because the only way we're going to make a change with any of this is we start to listen to these, and listen properly to these unrepresented voices. So I think let's start paying attention to the way we listen, because being curious about women ed's really been game changing for me on a personal level.
It's funny, actually, Chris, I was listening to a podcast by Brené Brown the other day, and she said, and I used it actually in a webinar I did the other day. She said, listen with the same passion that you want to be heard. And I was like, yes.
Love that.
Yes, I loved it. And I literally use that now in because I do lots of DEI work, and I use it for every session I do, because some of those conversations can be quite challenging and really kind of ruffle people's feathers. So I always start with that now, just to kind of say to people, look, please just listen. Just listen. So no, that was definitely perfect thing. Chris D.
Mute. There you go. I'm muted again. I'm always following our lovely Chris today. It's confusing everybody. I think so. I just before COVID started, well, the year before COVID started, working with underrepresented groups. I think it's something like, without having the exact figures on the top of my head, I think 90% of teachers in primary schools are female, and something like 85% of heads or senior leaders are male. So therefore, there's not an equal sort of balance there whatsoever. And if you look at the BME community, the percentages there are very small when you're looking at the sort of senior positions. So I undertook a project, which was actually fantastic, especially when I tell you sort of the outcome, where I coached and sort of helped develop and give experience to BME leaders who wanted to progress and needed that break to be able to move into deputy headships and headships. And I was very pleased that around about a month ago, I found out that lovely Dee, who I was working with, had secured a first deputy head position. So again, us all working together and communicated together. I know there was a bit of upset with the number of males on the sort of panel today and things, but it was important that our working alongside each other, and obviously people didn't know how many facilitators that would be involved and things, but by working together we can really work as a team. As I said, my upbringing was brought up with a mum who was part-time at university, and she showed that work ethic, she showed the education, but also as a family growing up in the 70s, we saw the hardship through the sexism and through lack of opportunities, that she had to work 10 times as hard to get to the position where she is. So for myself and lots of other people on here, it's essential that we listen and we give back and things. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, I suppose just words like I think it was James had mentioned earlier on, just the words that we use and the things that we say, like it honestly, like some of the comments even just made to me, I think I had a feedback from an interview once, and somebody I've said this before, but somebody said that I needed to be gentler, and I was like, sorry. Now, obviously, what I wanted to say from that feedback was not what I did say, but it was just, I couldn't believe it. And in the end, I had to throw it back at him and say, so, and I knew a bit about his daughter and what she was doing. And I said, so if your daughter had gone into an interview and had got that as feedback, how would you feel about that? You know, I just couldn't believe that he felt that it was okay to kind of make, you would never have said that to a man. Like was what I ended with. Like it was, you would have never said that to a man in feedback. Like it was just shocking. And but words kind of have major impacts on people. And I, you know, afterwards, and we've had conversations since then, and he was like, I just didn't even, it just came out. And it was like, do you know what, we need to be conscious then, very conscious of the words we use, because when it comes to things like, you know, we were just talking about there is sexism, or when it comes, all of these things, we just have to be very deliberate in our language when we're having conversations as well, because the impact that this has is, you know, it is just ridiculous. But it's just about us opening, like there's lots of work to be done around this and around recruitment and around openness, because I can't, was it who had said originally, they said, you know, oh, I think James, actually, you had said there weren't that many people from diverse groups, and you know, we're talking about all groups here, you know, like whether it be female, whether it be gender, do you know what I mean? Like there's all groups. Are these people stepping forward? Like, is anybody stepping forward, and why are they not stepping forward? And actually we need to think about, are we allowing a platform there? Like, you know, what does representation look like? I had a conversation with my principal the other day, and he was saying that and he was saying, you know, he was really shocked that one of our members of staff, and so I'm in the Middle East, so you would expect that female Muslim women wouldn't be, you know, like a thing, but a female Muslim woman that we have in our school, we were just having a very casual conversation, and she said one of the first things she did before applying to school was she looked at the website and looked at like the pictures of staff and saw if she was going to feel welcome in the school because of that. And he was just so shocked that that was something that she did. And I was like, that's the first thing I do. Like, I'm not applying to a school unless I see that I'm actually going to be able to step through the door and not feel like the odd one out. But there are loads of things that people don't realize, that if you're, you know, from a group that's not the norm, you know, these are the things that we have to do, you know, just Absolutely. Like someone was saying about the way we dress or the way we look. So I just think there's like lots of conversation, and lots of people in the chats have been saying, well, how do we do this? How do we move this forward? And I just feel we just need to keep these conversations going. Look, everyone knows women are here, you know, so keep looking at this, and everybody needs to be sharing what they're doing in their environments as well. Like, how are they supporting?
Absolutely, Natasha, and I wish we could keep this conversation going even longer, but we're up to our final minute or so. I'd hoped we would have had time to pull some of the threads together, but I think maybe the key question there is, as Natasha was sharing from the chat, this can only just be a start, really, can't it? We're scratching the surface with each each topic we've explored, and there were very many others we could have added in. So maybe the key question is, if we're all talking in this way, how are we going to be able to encourage other people to join in that conversation? What can each and every one of us do to take the conversation to other people who aren't here? I think the phrase in the chat was, if we're the converted, how are we going to work with the unconverted? And I think that is the central challenge, and it's why we wanted to do this event, which is our very first one in this format, to actually say we have got a shared conversation here, and there's so much we can all learn from each other. Can we, from Women Ed, say thank you very much to our panelists? You've been super in giving up your time and your prep, and persisting with giving the clarity as to the purpose of this event, which is to support everyone in education to be much more aware of gender equity, and to support and bring about close the gaps that we're exploring and talking about. And thanks to everybody in the audience for joining in and making it a very lively chat. We'll save the chat and we'll send the comments back out to everybody who's booked to join us this evening. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been absolutely fabulous, both for the audience and the panelists speaking and chatting away. You'll have to tell us if we think we should do something similar in the future. Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Good night.
Thanks, Vivian. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for
Bye,
joining
everybody.
in.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Woo!
Stop recording.
That's what I'm trying to find.